I can do this with my eyes closed. It's too easy. It's too easy. I can do this with my eyes closed. It's too easy. Too easy. It's too easy. I've been there, done it, seen it. Boy, all that like Keenan. Still got crack, they fiendin'. Flow still hot like Phoenix. Shine so bright, I'm gleaming. This off top, I'm tweaking. Fresh out the rat like Neiman. And I'm still tryna fight my demons. Cause we all gotta act like Tina. That's why I gotta ride with the Nina. Outside, it's a war going on. Make me put my hands on my head like the Macarena. They want you walking on board like Kima.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Breaking Bet here on this Tuesday, March 21st. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm JohnnyVTV, riding solo today. I want to start doing every week, early in the week, Tuesdays usually, the top 25 college baseball breakdown. So we had a seismic shift this past weekend. 5 teams left, 5 new teams came in, a couple of severe drops for some of the best programs in the nation. So I want to talk about that and, you know, what's going on and what's going to happen throughout the course of this year. So let's get right into it. We're going to have, obviously, these rankings, as you could see. LSU is 1, Wake Forest 2, Florida 3, Arkansas 4, Vandy 5, Louisville 6, Virginia 7, ECU 8, Stanford 9, South Carolina 10, Tennessee 11, Texas Tech 12, Grand Canyon 13, Ole Miss 14, UCLA 15, Campbell 16, Miami 17, Texas A&M 18, 19 is USC, 20 is Boston College, OK State at 21, 22 Kentucky, 23 Florida Gulf Coast, 24 Mizzou, and 25 is West Virginia. These are my personal rankings. You're going to find different rankings across 5 or 6 different sites. So, you know, some of these are not going to be the same. I have different, positions than other sites like a D1 Baseball or NCAA or Baseball of America do. But just for my own purposes, I want to keep it to mine in particular. So obviously start off with number 1, LSU. They're an absolute daddy wagon. They're unbelievable. They're going to probably have 2 of the top 5 picks in this upcoming draft in July with Paul Skeens and Dylan Cruz. Dylan Cruz is the projected 1 pick, but if Paul Skeens, the transfer from Air Force, keeps pitching the way he has a microscopic ERA under 0.5. Has a K through 9 that's 18 K through 9. And this kid is unbelievable. He's got a fastball, 100 miles an hour. He's got a really good slider. He has great command. He doesn't walk people. I think he has 58 strikeouts to 4 walks this season, which is absolutely unheard of. He dominated Texas A&M, who was number 15 coming into the weekend. And I think LSU should be ranked here. It's no surprise. I think, given their odds about 5-1 to win it all, it sounds good. They kind of profile to me like a Tennessee was last year, just an unbeatable team. But it always comes down to what the draw is in June. So if they get a tough team, if they have to face, maybe they face a tough like a South Carolina or something like that, this is going to be something that we have to keep our eyes on. But no surprise here with them. Now, some movement here was Wake Forest to number 2. I previously had Wake Forest ranked 3 or 4. I can't remember off the top of my head. The Demon Deacons are one of the most loaded rosters, pitching and hitting in all of baseball. They're 3 starters, each have a sub 1.9 ERA. Their ace, Rhett Lauder, is a projected top 10 pick. He's been sparkling this year with a 1.74. And, he's got a great changeup. That's his go-to pitch. So I'd really look at this pitching staff as one to be feared. They pride themselves, the pitching lab, they call it, down in Wake Forest, as one of having the best unit in all of baseball, with a great closer by the name of Camden Minacci, product of Tampa Bay. Offensively, they have maybe the best 1 through 5 batting order in the entire nation, led by a couple guys who are going to be on the watch list for Golden Spikes. Brock Wilken, who has the tied country lead in home runs at 13, and Nick Kurtz, who, in my opinion, is going to be a top 5 pick in 2024. That kid is 30 home run potential. He is the real deal, absolute monster. So I think Wake Forest, they're the class of the ACC, in my opinion. They're close with Louisville, but they definitely have the advantage. Their depth is what really separates them. And it's not just depth. They have playmakers at every single position. So beating them over the course of a series is a very tall task, even for some of the best teams in the nation. So I think Wake Forest, who is one of my prize possession tickets to win it all this year, is rightfully number 2. I think this is going to be a team that's going to go very deep this year. They have a lot of different ways to beat you. And, they rightfully deserve the number 2 spot after beating Notre Dame this past weekend. So number 3, we have the Florida Gators. The Gators had a good weekend. They beat Alabama, and that comes after beating Miami a couple weeks ago, both ranked opponents. They're in the same boat as Wake Forest in terms of depth and playmakers. The one problem Florida has right now that shouldn't be too big of an issue down the stretch of the season, they lost Wyatt Langford, who is a top 5 prospect in baseball. I picture him as this generation's Mike Trout. This kid is the real deal. He's a 5-tool guy. He can do it all, and they're going to be missing him. They bat him number 2, and he sets the tone. He scores a lot of runs. He drives in a lot of runs. He can run the base as well. He hits home runs. He plays great defense. So I think, Florida's going to go maybe through a little bit of a run scoring deficit, just a bit, but still they have guys like Jack Caglianone, two-way phenom, who right now is looking like the number 1 prospect in 2024 with the ability to throw 98 as a lefty and possibly lead the nation in home runs. That's just, everybody's calling him Jack Tani, or Cagliotani, but it's pretty funny. I think Florida, they have 3 number 1 pitchers. They have 3 guys who would head most rotations in any other team. So they're led by Brandon Sproat, who was a 3rd-round pick last year to the Mets. Let that go, came back to school for 1 more year. Right now, he came off a complete game shutout where he threw 11 strikeouts and only allowed 1 hit to Alabama this past week. And if he keeps pitching like that with the fastball, it's 100 miles an hour, he's going to be a first-round pick this year. Saturday, guys, Hurston Waldrop, transfer from Southern Miss. This kid's awesome. His stuff is disgusting. Another elite live arm, fastball up close to 100 miles an hour, even hits 100 miles an hour. Good slider, and he's got a really good split changeup. The one problem is Waldrop's a little bit inconsistent. Because he's a big strikeout guy, he throws a lot of pitches, hasn't worked as deep into games as we may have expected. But still, Waldrop is probably going to be within the top 10. I would imagine he's the 3rd arm off the board just based off potential behind Chase Dollinger and Paul Skeens this year. I really like Waldrop, and then obviously Jack Caggs is Sunday. So the one bugaboo with the Florida Gators, though, is their bullpen. They have a couple good arms like Cade Fisher and Ryan Nesbitt, but that's the one thing to watch. We've seen historically the teams that win, the teams that make deep runs, they have deep pitching staffs. They have really good bullpens. Ole Miss last year, Arkansas last year. We've seen it a lot, and that's the one reason why Florida might not win it all. I still have a ticket on them at 15-1. I gave them out. They're still 12-1. I think fair price is 9.5, 9-1. So definitely still value there if you want to go grab it. I think realistically, though, Florida, with the amount of runs that they score and how good their starting staff is, they should still be a good shot to make the College World Series. And if they get a good draw, they might go all the way this year. Now, Arkansas at number 4 is they're a little unsung right now. They're the quietest top 5 team that I've heard about for the last few weeks. And they're coming off a good series where they took from Auburn. And, this is just a fundamentally solid team. They have some good offensive weapons, but their main catalyst is their pitching. And they lost a couple guys. Jackson Wiggins was slated to be the Saturday guy. Brady Tigert, their one hell of a stud reliever, is out for at least the next month or so. They lose Cody Frank. So there's a lot of guys that are missing for them. But because Arkansas is so deep and so well coached by Dave Van Horn, this is a rightful, deserving 4 spot for the Razorbacks. And again, this is a team that's probably going to make the Supers this year. I don't know if they have enough depth like they did last year to win it all or, make it even to the finals. But this is going to be a team that's definitely worth watching, as always. Number 5 is a surprise here at Vanderbilt. And it's not a surprise in the fact that they don't deserve to be here. It's just a surprise that I wasn't that high on Vandy coming in. I didn't think their team, outside of like Enrique Bradfield Jr. and Parker Noland, was going to do anything special offensively. I knew they had good pitching, led by sophomore Carter Holton. They have 3 lefties as the rotation. They have some good bullpen pieces. That's really Vanderbilt's game. They're coming off a huge series where they swept Ole Miss, who was number 3 at the time, the defending national champions. So that is a very impressive win to sweep Ole Miss, especially for a Vandy team that I wasn't really high on. And I'm still not, but maybe they're kind of coming back into form where we could look at betting them each weekend, especially on a Friday night. They have a couple guys from New Jersey who are alumni of the high school, same high school, Seton Hall Prep in West Orange, New Jersey. Chris and Nick Maldonado. Chris Maldonado's a freshman. He's hitting the cover off the ball. He wasn't really playing that much in the first week or so. And when he finally got his opportunity, he's been absolutely raking, leads the team in doubles. He found his way into that DH spot, hitting 5 or 6. This kid is really good. So if he's providing that steady pop in the middle of the lineup, Vandy might be able to squeak out, 35 wins this year. And again, host a regional. Louisville, I like Louisville. I don't think they're as good as everybody thinks they are. Number 6 team, good series win against Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech's one of those scrappy teams that, can do a lot of damage. They live off a lot of power, and I think that the Cardinals definitely deserve this spot. I wouldn't really be invested in them in the futures market. I think it's fair they'll probably host a regional this year. Maybe if they get a good draw, they'll win and go to the supers, but I just don't think their offense is enough firepower. They lose guys like Cam Masterman and Dalton Rushing, who combined for almost 50 home runs a season ago. So let's see how they do once they start playing the Wake Forests and they start playing a little bit better of the class of the ACC. Next is Virginia. The Virginia Cavaliers had a really, really good weekend. They put it on NC State, who was previously ranked, and I think Virginia is always one of those teams that's quiet. You got to keep an eye on them. I think again they'll host a region. I just don't know if they're going to have enough weapons. Like they do have guys like Kyle Teal, who's really good. Jake Geloff, whose older brother Zach plays for Oakland. I think Virginia is going to fall a little bit short this year, but definitely deserves 7th spot right now. They're a top 7 team for sure. East Carolina, I have them high. I have them at number 8. This is one of the most resilient teams I've seen in college baseball. They're leading the way for the mid-major programs by far. I just think when you look at East Carolina, their 1-2 pitching staff with Trey Savage and Carter Spivey is really good. It's probably the best in their conference. And they have some pretty good offense players led by Jacob Starling. But the thing is, Cliff Godwin, their head coach, he preaches resiliency. They get gut punched and they find a way to come back. So I'm really into East Carolina Pirates. I think they're a good team. They're probably going to be in the supers this year, host a regional in Greenville, and we'll see where it goes because, this ECU team, again, I won't take a ticket on them because I don't think they're going to win it all. I don't think they have enough horses, but they are fun to watch. If you haven't seen East Carolina play in the Jungle, their home stadium, I suggest you do so because that is an electric environment, especially come June. Next is a little bit of a surprise in terms of overall standings from recent years. Stanford is regarded as one of the top programs in the country. I personally don't buy them long term. They're going to win 40 games. They're probably going to win the Pac-12. I equate them to the college baseball version of the LA Dodgers. Win a lot of games in the regular season. They have star power. They ooh and ah. But when they get there, when they get into the postseason, they're a little bit shaky. They're not really as clutch as they need to be. They should have lost in the regionals last year to Texas State. Tristan Stivers, the closer for Texas State, started the game, 7 innings, 1 run, 9 Ks. And then their ace, Levi Wells, came in to close the game out, which sometimes later in the season, college teams will do that in order to, deepen their pitching staff. They'll start their closer if they have a really good one. But Stanford, they're the 9 team. They're top 10. I think that they're going to have a couple first rounders, Tommy Troy, Drew Bowser, Carter Graham, Braden Montgomery. They have a good ace in Quinn Matthews. They have a couple good bullpen pitchers. There's a 24-1 out there on FanDuel. I probably would take that just because that's too big of a price for a team like Stanford with their pedigree. And, they should be 40 wins and, hosting a regional and probably at least in the supers and most likely the College World Series. So if you're getting a price on a team like that at this juncture, I would advise taking that. Next is South Carolina. South Carolina is loaded. They're leading the nation in home runs and ERA. This team was not that good last year, but they really revamped, led by Gavin Casas, younger brother of Red Sox prospect Tristan Casas. They have 3 good pitchers. They have Jack Mahoney as the Sunday guy, Noah Hall as a Saturday, and top 18 draft prospect Will Sanders. I was kind of looking at South Carolina coming into the year, and I was talking about them at 100-1 about a month ago, and the price got cut in half. This team is really, really good. They have attitude. They have the weapons, and I think the Gamecocks, who I call the Rakecocks, should actually be maybe even a little bit higher by the end of this weekend, depending on what they do. But South Carolina is a fun team to take a ticket on at 50-1. I didn't grab them at 100-1 just because I have so many other tickets that it starts becoming almost counterproductive. But this is definitely a team that can make the College World Series and make some noise. Definitely. I really like South Carolina. I think they're a very good team, and they're going to give teams like LSU, Tennessee, Florida, Vanderbilt a lot of problems in the conference. Speaking of Tennessee, they had a seismic movement. Tennessee dropped from number 2 to number 11. They got swept by Mizzou. That is unbelievable. Their pitchers got their asses beat. Chase Dollinger, who I regard as this generational prospect, the next Steven Strasburg. That's the hype he should get. I think he should be the number 1 pick. He got killed. It was mind-boggling. Chase Burns on Saturday, he got lit up. Drew Beam on Sunday doubleheader, Burns and Beam both got beat up pretty good. But more importantly, I'm not worried about the pitching. That happens. I kind of chalk it up to, Tennessee's going through growing pains. They had a lot of turnover from last year, and they're still finding their groove a little bit. But mainly, they were playing in 35-degree weather with wind. So, that kind of thing doesn't really scare me. It's just that's like a fluke thing. That's not going to be a problem come, May. So I think Tennessee in the pitching department is going to be fine. But it's the offense that worries me. Mizzou has a couple good pitchers. Their Friday guy, Chandler Murphy, threw okay. He allowed a lot of walks, and he didn't get hurt for it. But, Tennessee's offense, they have to be coming around. They have guys like Blake Burke, who I would have taken a ticket on to win SEC Player of the Year this year if that market existed. They have a great transfer from Kansas named Maui Ahuna. This offense has got to get going. So this is a really important series this weekend for Tennessee. So I think if they come out, they win 2 out of 3. I would think I would find them back into the top 6 for next weekend. So Tennessee really needs to shake it off because this is kind of a turning point for them. They haven't played well against better teams so far this year. And I have high expectations on Tennessee. I have them winning it all. I have a nice ticket on them. So, we need the Vols to really step it up. Next, we're going to go with Texas Tech. They were number 22 ranked nationwide last week. They really impressed this week. They come out and they beat number 12 Oklahoma State. Now, Oklahoma State to me is a good team. They're going to make the tournament. I just don't know how far they're going to go. I'm a little worried about their depth, and, they're really living off a couple of key guys. But they came in and they took the series from them, which is still really impressive. And, granted, the result might have been different if on Friday Oklahoma State didn't give away a 7-1 lead. We might be having a different conversation. But they put it on them on Sunday with Warren Watts-Brown, their ace, who got scratched on Saturday because of health reasons. But I think Texas Tech definitely earned this. I'm still not sold on them long term. I think Texas Tech is a good team, but they're not the class of the Big 12. I really wouldn't be too high on them for the rest of the season. They lost a lot of key guys from last year. Jace Jung, who got drafted to the Tigers, older brother Josh coming up with the Rangers this year. They lose Andrew Morris and Brandon Birchall, their top 2 arms from a season ago. Now 13 is Grand Canyon. I love the Grand Canyon Antelopes. I've had them ranked for a couple weeks now. Most of the other sites have just put them in. I have them high. To me, they're the second best mid-major program right now. And, this team, I also have a ticket on at 75-1. I don't think Grand Canyon necessarily has what it takes to win it all, but I think they can make a run to the Supers, maybe even the College World Series as a surprise team if they get the right draw, and that's really what it comes down to. But Grand Canyon's got 3 good pitchers. And, at least in terms for the WAC, I don't know what it would look like when it comes to, matching up with the ACC and the SEC, but for all intents and purposes, they got three good arms. They got Zach Thornton, Daniel Avisha, and Connor Markle. And then they have a pretty good offense led by, my opinion, the best shortstop prospect in Jacob Wilson. His father played in the MLB, and they have a really good young guy who's coming along strong, Homer Bush, who is going to be probably he could be a first rounder in the next couple of years. I think he's a freshman or a sophomore. I don't think he's eligible, but this kid Homer Bush is showing a lot of prospect, kind of five-tool-esque. So I'm big on Grand Canyon this year. They find a lot of ways to win, and they're very versatile and diverse. So I think the Antelopes are a team that, to me, should be higher than what other people have them at. And that brings us to number 14, Ole Miss. Ole Miss, the defending national champions, was ranked number 3. After getting swept by Vanderbilt last week, they dropped all the way to 14 for me. I just don't think that Ole Miss is as good as people think. I think the big problem with the Rebels is their pitching. Dylan DeLucia saved them last year. He saved their season. He pitched like an absolute Cy Young winner. But this year, they lose Hunter Elliott, who, I don't know if he officially had to get Tommy John, but he's been out for a while. He's supposed to be their Friday guy. He hasn't been pitching. So that forces Jack Doherty, who's maybe a Saturday guy at best, into the Friday role, putting Grayson Saunier as the number 2 freshman who, he's been a little bit wobbly. I'm not sold on this Ole Miss pitching. So I think this dramatic of a drop for them is definitely fair. I don't buy Ole Miss to make a deep run again. It's so hard to go back-to-back, and I just don't think they have enough firepower. They got really lucky last year. They got the best draw they possibly could have asked for. They avoided all the major teams out, and they didn't even have to play the best team on their side of the bracket in Stanford. They had a tight win against Arkansas, who was pretty good, but I don't buy Ole Miss coming into the year. And they're a top 25 team, but I just don't think they're worthy of being a top 5 program. They do not have enough pitching. If Hunter Elliott comes back and he starts throwing to what he's capable of, then maybe we'll reconsider. But for now, that's a no. All right, we got UCLA. Now, I have UCLA a lot lower than like D1 baseball does. Some of these teams have UCLA in the top 8. I don't buy UCLA. Listen, they had a good series win. I think they swept Arizona this past weekend. Arizona's a feisty team. I wouldn't necessarily say they're a good team, but nonetheless, it's impressive. And I think UCLA, their problem to me is offensively, they're not consistent. They don't have enough boppers to compete with some of the other power programs. And, they really live off their pitching. Jake Brooks, their Friday guy, Alonzo Treadwell, their Saturday guy. I think they're solid. I think UCLA is a well-coached team. They find ways to win. They're kind of pitch first type of mentality. So they definitely deserve to be here, but I just don't buy them being that high up. I feel like all the other teams I have ahead of them are rightfully better. They have a lot more firepower on both sides of the ball. And then Campbell. Campbell's my prized possession here. I got the Camels at 300 to 1 a couple weeks ago to win it all. They're a top 3 mid-major program. They are an offensive juggernaut. They're always among the league lead in the entire nation in runs scored, home runs, average. This team can hit. And even though they're not as good as they were last year, this is a team that can make a run and make some noise. The one thing I would say they have to clean up is the pitching. Cade Cooler, their Friday guy, who was a Saturday guy last year behind Thomas Harrington, who went first round to the Pirates. He's good. I think he'll be a top 25 pick this year. He just got to focus on the control a little bit more. But I think overall, the Camels have to improve their pitching staff. I think they have to get a little bit more consistent. They're not pitching up to their capability. They have some works in progress. One of their secret weapons I really like, Daniel Brown, lefty out of the pen, throwing 100 miles an hour. I think Campbell is definitely capable of getting their own region, which they most likely will. And if they do, I think the Camels are going to be a force to be reckoned with, because if their pitching kind of catches up to their hitting, they're going to be a difficult out. And last year, they, in my opinion, might have made the College World Series had they not gotten the draw in Tennessee's region. So Campbell's one to keep an eye on. I would definitely take a ticket at 75 to 1 on the Camels, because they are a good team. and people will not want to see them come time for June because this team can hit. And luckily, they play in a bad conference in the Big South where they're the cream of the crop by far. They should be a 40-win team again, which, will boost their resume heading into the tournament itself. Next is a big jump. We have Miami. So I actually had Miami ranked last week in 25 because they were coming off a good series against NC State. Ranked NC State. And then this past weekend, they mopped Virginia Tech. They brought out the brooms. They swept them. Virginia Tech was a solid team. They were a ranked team as well. And I think Miami's kind of hitting their stride. I was a little bit worried about them being a top-heavy roster, and I kind of still am, but they're getting production from multiple different sources. You got Yohandy Morales, who in my opinion could be a top 12 pick in July. He added about 20 pounds of muscle. He's really driving the ball way better than he did last year, and last year was a big season for him. CJ Kayfish, great on-base guy, coming up with clutch hits. Blake Sear, good freshman. Ian Farrow, strong transfer. And, Carson Legan, their pitcher, is become their Friday guy, who was their Saturday guy last year. He's starting to show a little bit more promise, as well as Gage Zeal, who's a first-time starter this year, now settling into the Saturday role. And, of course, they have an All-American closer by the name of Andrew Walters, who I think he's the best closer in the country. And, this kid is unhittable. So most of the time when Miami goes in late into the game with a lead and they need somebody to close it out, they have a guy that can do so. So I have Miami moving up big this week. They deserved it. 2 back-to-back impressive series wins against ranked opponents. Absolutely. 18 brings us to Texas A&M. Texas A&M was 15 last week against LSU. They honestly should have got swept. LSU on Sunday imploded. They were up 5-1, and then they get outscored 7-1 in the second half of the week, second half of the game. Nonetheless, Texas A&M loses a series to LSU, which, can't really fault them. LSU is the best team in the country for a reason. So, there's worse things in the world than that. But, the Aggies are still a tough team. I was really high on them last year. They have a couple really good hitters. They have Jack Moss. Hunter Haas has gotten insanely hot right now. Austin Bosch, Ryan Targak has been struggling a little bit. He's still pretty good. And then their pitching has found a way. I like Nathan Detmer. I think Nathan Detmer is probably a top 40 pick this year in the draft. When he's consistent, he's on. He's doing his thing. He's pretty good. So A&M here is a top 25 team for sure. So I think falling a little bit is definitely fair. Next is UNC. UNC, I'm only ranking them right now because they're playing well enough. I just don't think that this team is built for success. They'll make the regionals, but they really live off a few players. They live off Vance Honeycutt, their All-American outfielder, center fielder, who, in my opinion, profiles as a Trey Turner. He's a 5-tool guy. And they got Mac Horvath. Mac Horvath is also a guy that you have to keep on for the prospects. He's a really good hitter. And then their Friday guy, Max Carlson, solid, but they don't have much depth. They have a rough bullpen. They don't have a loaded lineup. So I don't think UNC is built to really succeed down the stretch of the season. But, for this week, they earned top 25 status. I think, they stay in here because they haven't really done anything to warrant being taken out. So UNC in here is fair. Here's where we get to the fun part. A lot of turnover this week. Starts with Boston College. Now, Boston College in some platforms was ranked, I believe, last week. But like D1 Baseball didn't have them ranked. I didn't have them ranked. I wanted to really see. They came out this week and they beat the brakes off Florida State. They took 2 games from them. Very impressive, going down to ranked Tallahassee and beating the Seminoles. This comes after beating Virginia Tech, I believe, in the series last week, also ranked. So back-to-back big series wins for the Eagles. They're deserving of this top 20 ranking, in my opinion, because they have a lot of different ways to beat you. Their offense is quietly good, led by Travis Honeyman and Barry Walsh. They have a couple guys that could do some damage in the lineup. They're a very pesky, resilient team, but pitching is really where they get their name. Led by who, for some reason, is their Saturday guy, Chris Flynn, who might be all ACC first team this year. He's got a .75 ERA, 4-0, and this comes as a guy who tops out at 92. He knows how to pitch. He's got a good breaking ball. He works in, out, up, down, changes speeds. He's a great pitcher who is really shining this year, and he's spearheading this Boston College team for sure. So love what I'm seeing from the Eagles. I thought about taking them at 300 to 1, maybe for a ticket. I just don't know if they're going to be able to compete with, the better teams come time in June. But it's definitely one that I'm going to keep my eye on because Boston College is absolutely one of the best teams in the nation right now. On the reverse side of Texas Tech is going to be OK State, who drops from top 12 to 21st. Bad weekend. Bullpen blew a huge lead on Friday that would have got the series off to a good start. And then Sunday, they just got their asses beat by Texas Tech. Watts Brown just was not sharp. I don't know if it's just maybe he's sick and, he's not himself. But either way, Oklahoma State, that's not a good way to start off series play here in the Big 12. So, they were due for a sizable drop because of that. But I would still keep my eyes out because Oklahoma State is probably going to be a 36-win team, make the regionals, maybe get out into the supers if they get a good draw. Now, here we go. Kentucky. The Kentucky Wildcats are on a 14-game winning streak. They just swept Mississippi State, one of my dark horses for this year. This team has always been kind of like under the radar. Even last year, I kind of like taking shots on them at different parts of the series, even against tough teams like Tennessee and, Florida, those kind of things. Kentucky is always one of these teams that doesn't make a lot of noise, but when it comes to the box score, they're always right up there. I mean, they're absolutely outrageous right now. They have 18 wins. They're 18-2. They're right up there with LSU in the SEC in terms of record. This is a team that we're definitely going to be on the lookout for because if they found a way to sneak into the tournament, it would not surprise me. And it just shows how deep the SEC is when Kentucky theoretically is one of the worst teams in the conference. They would still be one of the best teams in any other conference. So Kentucky, shout out to them. They're finding different ways to win, and this is really what it's all about in the SEC. Now we got Florida Gulf Coast, who has kind of been ranked for the last couple of weeks. They made a statement a couple of weeks ago by going down into Tallahassee and killing the Florida State Seminoles. So I think Gulf Coast is worthy keeping this top 25 spot. They play in a really bad conference, so I'm not totally sure, how their talent is going to match up to some of the other programs. But, you got to give them credit. They're 16-4. They got a couple of solid pitchers like Justin Henschel and Mason Miller, but their offense is loaded. 5 guys batting over 300. They have 40 home runs as a team. Right now they're a weapon. And, this is kind of the thing that happens with teams from Florida and California and Texas. They're such big states. There's so much talent in that talent pool. So you get the guys that don't go to Florida or Miami or FSU, but they're still really good and they can shine in other programs. And that's a typical case of what happens with Gulf Coast. So, right now they deserve it. That they're playing really good baseball. And I think the Eagles are definitely a team that's going to be somebody you have to keep an eye out for. And, they're definitely going to be bettable throughout the year on the weekend series. So next is Mizzou. I was a little tentative to rank Mizzou this week, despite sweeping Tennessee, which is very impressive. It's very impressive. Mizzou is projected the worst team in the SEC coming into the year, but they kind of shedded those lack of expectations. They're 16-3. They're playing really good baseball. They beat Texas, TCU to open up the year. They took FIU 2 games. And obviously they sweep Tennessee, which was like the cherry on top. I just don't know if Mizzou's that good. Like, are they that good or they're just playing really well right now? And it's just going to balance out throughout the year. I mean, either way, I feel like just sweeping Tennessee, I had to put them in there. It would have looked like I was too salty if I didn't put them in there. I'm not expecting much from Mizzou, but I'm going to give them their props. They deserve to be in the top 25 after last week. And then finally, we have West Virginia. West Virginia, I'm not so sure about because, again, they're not in the best of conferences, but they're 15-4. They have some really good pitchers, Blaine Traxel, Ben Hampton, and they're led by J.J. Weatherholt, who's batting .462 with a 13.22 OPS, 5 home runs, 17 steals out of 19 attempts. This guy's spearheading the Mountaineers right now. And, based off how well they're playing, I think they're going to be a dark horse team to get into this tournament, maybe even possibly win a couple games, win a regional. I probably wouldn't bet on them, though. I just don't think that West Virginia's got enough talent in order to do so. I feel like they're again, one of these teams that's gotten off to a hot start, and they have a couple guys that are really shining at the moment. But just in terms of longevity, it's hard to imagine that West Virginia is going to be one of the best teams in the country. At some point, we expect the teams that fell out, TCU, VTech, Southern Miss, NC State, Alabama, to work their way back into the top 25 rankings, making teams like Mizzou, West Virginia, Kentucky fall out at some point. But, through 5 weeks, heading into week 6, I think this is a pretty fair assessment. And obviously, some of these other teams like TCU, maybe a little bit dramatic taking them out after their series with Oklahoma. I think TCU is a good team, but, long-term, their pitching is really, really worrisome. Their one guy, Ryan Vanderhey, Cam Brown, they have a couple good starters, but other than that, this is a team that is built off offense, and if they're not swinging the bat well, they are really not a team that's going to do a lot of damage. So thank you so much for tuning into my top 25 rankings. A lot of fun. We'll be back Friday, 1 p.m. Matt Grissom. We're talking all the best college baseball bets for Friday, and I'll see you next week when it comes to more college baseball rankings.
I can do this with my eyes closed.